In a world where many people see reality as a circle or a rectangle, the truth is that issues are cylinders. Rather than a two-dimensional understanding, we will flush out the three-dimension complexities through nuanced conversation and civil, respectable discourse to highlight all perspectives on controversial issues. I'm your host, William Roosh, a high school teacher who's trying to transform education as we know it. Welcome to the Anti-Echo Chamber. This is Cylinder Radio. Hello and welcome to the next lesson of Cylinder Radio. Today we're going to talk about curiosity, and my guest, I'm very excited to have him here, is Reid Nicewonder. I didn't ask you before we started recording. Am I saying that right?
That's right.
Yeah. Okay. He runs a really awesome YouTube channel called Cordial Curiosity. And if you're not familiar with it, I hope you check it out. I'll put links out there and stuff like that because it's really just, I love it. It's fascinating and it's really fun to watch. And he does street epistemology, which epistemology is the study of knowledge essentially and doing that on the street. I found him because I'm guessing he was done interviews with Peter Boghossian and James Lindsay. I've had them on my show and kind of follows a little bit of like their thinking on the way they do things and stuff like that. Also, he's very even-keeled and very calm. And I feel I'm always like going off in these rants and going nuts. And I just finished a day of teaching kids. So I'm glad you're here, Reid. You're going to calm me down a little bit, it seems. Thank you for coming on my show. Can you introduce yourself a little bit to the audience?
Sure thing. Yeah. Thanks for having me. My name is Reid. I have this hobby where I go out in public in LA and have conversations with anybody who's willing to sit down at my table. And I record the conversations and put the more interesting ones up on my YouTube channel called Cordial Curiosity. And I try to practice this conversational method called street epistemology, which originally came from Peter Boghossian's book a while back. And I've been trying to practice that ever since.
So one thing that stands out about you, Reid, is I get the feeling, whether you are or not, that you are very intelligent. And what's interesting about that is I did a YouTube video that has like 6 views or something before that were Mr. Roosh's life lessons. And one of my lessons that I've learned in my 37 years is that curiosity is smart. And what's interesting is you just talking to you, I'm like, oh, this guy is smart. But all I know you from is just from asking questions, just showing a lot of curiosity. What are your thoughts on that? Not like saying like, what are your thoughts on being smart, but what are your thoughts on that idea?
Well, this is like an education podcast, and in school, I was like a B.C. student most of the time, maybe a couple of A's sometimes. I don't think I'm that intelligent, but the things I'm interested in, I really dive into, and that was mostly filmmaking. I went to film school and kind of ignored my classes and just made short films and web series with my friends. So maybe that has something to do with my grades. But anyway, yeah, curiosity is something I valued and started to value later in life after college. So maybe that has increased my intelligence in some way, or at least allowed me to learn more in different things. I don't know.
Because you ask questions, then you're genuinely interested in the answers, right?
Yeah. And not just having an answer, but having reliable ways to get to the answer that doesn't rely on personal authority, and that also it's not an answer that you could say is like the final answer, that type of thing.
Mm-hmm. So what you do is I guess under the category of street epistemology. So like Anthony Magnabosco, I think has been doing this and stuff like that. Can you just kind of explain to a layperson and to people listening what that is and kind of what you do?
Sure, I'll try to give you the Cliff Notes version. Yeah. It's basically a modified version of the Socratic Method, where we try to focus on what people believe, why, and how they came to think their whys are good reasons. So we want to have most of our conversation talking about how someone knows something. And so we just, the format is basically someone picks a belief, something they really think is true. We don't want to impose a topic on them. We let them pick a topic, and we ask them questions to help clarify, get the words right, get the definitions clarified. We ask usually we try to get someone's confidence about it, not, binary yes, no, but are you 99% confident, 100%, 70, not sure, 50? And that, can change the way the conversation goes depending on if it's 100 or 70. And then we talk about how can we know if this belief was mistaken? If it's like 100%, we start there usually, or, what are the reasons? How reliable are the ways they're coming to those reasons? And we just revise, and figure out where our confidence should be at. And if they are interested in my position, I try to be neutral the whole time. Ideally, they don't even know what I think about the topic by the end of it, unless they ask me. And we usually leave on a handshake and a smile. It's really fun.
Yeah. It's really cool to see how sometimes they get worked up, but they don't really, it's hard for them to get mad when you're just asking questions, but still people have their defenses up, which we'll get to. You mentioned the Socratic Method, and Socrates was essentially killed for asking questions.
Mm-hmm.
I watched a documentary. I was coming back on a flight, and I watched a documentary about Mike Wallace, and it started off with just how everyone was scared to do an interview with him, and it was really tough for me to understand that. Why would you be scared to answer questions? And I'm shocked in how people get angry, or I'm also shocked at how confident people are in unchallenged ideas. So what is your take, just from doing this a lot, about why people don't, and this is kind of getting into the psychology realm, but why is it that people just are terrified to answer even sometimes really basic questions? What's your take, being not, a brain expert, but just from experience?
Yeah, I'm a layman in psychology and all of this stuff. I'm just a random person who likes to practice this, but I have looked into, a bunch of psychology, mainstream pop psychology stuff, like The Righteous Mind from Jonathan Haidt, and his principle of morality binds and blinds is a huge influence on me. The world made a lot more sense after I understood that. So that's a big thing for me. And you also had James Lindsay on the podcast, his book, Everybody is Wrong About God, which is not really about God. It's about just moral communities, ideologically motivated moral communities, which that can apply to atheism itself in terms of religious type behaviors and activities. And so that goes into a lot of psychology of belief, of religion and authoritarianism. And those two are big influences. And The Elephant in the Brain by Kevin Simler and Robin Hanson. I think the subtitle to that is our hidden motives in everyday life, how our minds, our thoughts are not even produced consciously. There's a subconscious stuff going on that are driven by our selfish genes. So we try to appear as if we're altruistic and unselfish in a lot of our stuff we're doing, but really it's unconsciously a selfish type of motivation. And if you learn about that changes a lot of how you think of behavior as well with people.
Yeah, it's very frustrating for me, I'm a high school teacher, being in education, at how many teachers, educators are fall into this category of not wanting to dive deeper, or how to leave things unchallenged. And I don't think it's a coincidence that Peter Boghossian wrote a manual to create atheists, I believe was the name. And then and then he also is going after the social justice movements and stuff with his hoax papers and things like that, because he sees them as very, very similar. But a lot of people in social justice are actually atheists.
Mm-hmm. Both of Peter and Jim are a big fan of this other book called Kindly Inquisitors. And Peter went after the fundamentalist threat, which is religious, illiberalism. And now they're into trying to get rid of the humanitarian threat, which is the social justice type of behaviors we're seeing now.
Yeah, their recent book, the How to Have Impossible Conversations, which I know you did a podcast with someone on that and talked about it, and I posted on my social media. It's fantastic, and I recommend it to like everybody. But what would you, as someone who you said was just kind of a B student, wasn't super interested in what you weren't interested in school, what would it look like in like the average, if you brought this kind of idea into a classroom?
It can really be applied to almost any subject.
Yeah.
It's like you bring up a claim, any claim, and then you just ask questions about how we could know and what would the world need to look like if this was not true. What would cause us to revise our beliefs? Just trying to keep an open mind and just use our imaginations to put those scenarios out there. You want, Peter and Jim wrote a new book called How to Have Impossible Conversations. And one of their huge principles from that is try to figure out disconfirmation criteria for your beliefs. Have those in mind. So if you come across them, you'll be able to change your mind more effectively. And it keeps you just more humble in what you claim to know. So yeah, seeking disconfirmation rather than confirmation is a big part of it.
Yeah, confirmation bias and everything like that. And I've just used some of the tips from their book with people, and it's great and it works. But yeah, I mean, school is not structured that way. It's not curious, and teachers have an ego problem with saying that they don't know something. Where, Einstein and Socrates, which I both feel like they're fairly smart, talked about human stupidity and how the only real gauge of if you're intelligent is if you realize your ignorance and things of that nature. It's like the stealing curiosity and facilitating that in a deep dive from kids is so damaging, I think. And instead school becomes, here's information. And it's not about critical thinking. I kind of want to just make a series of like lesson plans and put them out there that would use these ideas in school, because I just don't see them. I don't think critical thinking is being done much in the classroom. It's really frustrating.
Yeah. Like nothing kills curiosity faster than sitting in behind a desk for 6 hours a day, just rote memorization and just blindly trying to learn what people tell you and not being, you can ask questions, but eventually it's like, we got to move on. We got to make sure we stick to the lesson plan.
Yeah. I mean, physics is done in a classroom with kids staring up at a whiteboard where someone's writing equations, and they're not building contraptions and things like that. It's just, it's wrong. I don't know. I mean, my standpoint, I feel like it's just wrong. And it's something that I think need to make a focus of bringing critical thinking back. And that's part of why I push to work with the Heterodox Academy and groups like that, of just like, we can do better. Let's take a different points of view when it comes to the education world. But the question of like, why not take a deep dive? I just recently posted on my social media, I did this with religion, where I read and watched a lot of debates and apologetics books. So I read C.S. Lewis and Timothy Keller, and then I read Boghossian and Sam Harris and Hitchens and Dawkins, and watched the debates between Harris and Jordan Peterson and David Wolpe and Hitchens and all these things. And it's really fast. It's so much fun to go down. At the end of the day, you're going to make your mind up on one side or the other, but why not at least just have like more basis to what you believe? Like what's the worst case scenario if you seek that disconfirmation? You're either going to reveal that you were wrong, which is good to know, or you're going to not be able to and reveal that you're right, which is good to know. Like what's the fear? It's getting back to, I guess, the psychology of it. But if we could just consciously like urge people to say like, what's the worst that could happen, guys? You get rid of bad ideas, right?
Yeah. What's the worst that could happen? I mean, evolutionarily, if we went against the tribe's beliefs and values, we might get killed or pushed out of the tribe, and it's just we're stuck with this hardware for the foreseeable future. And we just need to cultivate psychotechnologies, ways to mitigate these types of anxieties and create communities and systems to facilitate reflection and curiosity. That's hard to do, though.
Do you have like, did you have like using Eric Weinstein's idea, like like a portal experience to get you to think this way and to kind of fight against your particular, hardware, Reid? Like, did you go through something where you're like, oh, you know what? I'm going to start challenging my ideas? Or is this kind of your natural temperament that you always had?
Hard to say. It was pretty a slow burn, losing my faith and really religious beliefs. I grew up Southern Baptist.
Okay.
By the end of college, I was very apathetic. And after college, found Reddit and the atheism subreddit, then YouTube, and that led me down a rabbit hole. And it wasn't long after, after learning about skepticism, critical thinking, Carl Sagan stuff, it's more about having a different story to tell yourself and a different way to conceptualize yourself, your purpose, how to make sense of the world, how to be a good person. Without those things, it's hard to let go of your previous ideologies.
Yeah, maybe that's part of how we can get to the situation where I feel like I'm in, and I'm sure you are too. And I just had Zuby on the podcast, and he was talking about this a little bit, which is like, as soon as you are revealed to have a bad idea, you switch pretty quick. Like, oh, I was thinking this and it's wrong. Okay, well, I'll give that up. But maybe you need some sort of almost traumatic experience from your tribe. So if yours was with religion, mine was politically and within my family. So I was raised very left-leaning, and then I was, told that like Republicans are evil type of thing, and Democrats are good, and this is the way to do things, kind of like the, whatever, like white waspy, like is the way to do things. Then I went out to LA and had different experiences, met different people, met really crappy Democrats and really sweet Republicans. And I was like, it's not even that I went to the other side. It's not that. I just realized that there was more than one way to think, but I had to go through this turmoil of like, oh my God, everything I thought was true is maybe not true. I had to go through that to arrive on the other side. Do you think that's necessary?
Probably.
Yeah.
If our beliefs and ideologies were so fragile that any small question or counter argument would break them, it seems like they wouldn't be very useful or good. So I guess it does take something like that.
I have a decent faction of people who listen to the podcast and watch what I'm doing on social media are atheists. And I'm not an atheist. I don't consider myself an atheist. But I think that, again, what it is my willingness to dive deep into just everything, including my own faith, is something that I think appeals to people that are just curious and always looking for reasons and things like that are complicated, not just a simple answer to things. And I find that very interesting, because it's like the factions of people that I get that. I get a lot of also, I guess, like what is it called? It's like libertarian, but like extreme libertarian, like capitalist anarchists. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Are you familiar with that? Like, why do you think that they would be interested in this stuff as well?
We humans are very, diverse in terms of psychological profiles. Moral foundations theory has a bunch of data on this, where libertarians are a small but consistent set of humans that focus mainly on the liberty oppression intuition. So those are libertarians pretty much, and they're usually very spectrumy. They're very good at decoupling, very good at thinking of things in the abstract, and arguing about a lot of things.
Yeah, that kind of makes sense. Do you personally have like blind spots that you are aware of, that you go through this process to try and figure out, like deep dives that you do personally, that where you are like, oh, I'm kind of ignorant in this particular I started a podcast solely to just like figure out what I think about, try to bring like smart people from both sides and try and figure this stuff out, because I'm clueless about a lot of things. Do you have like areas that you are actively trying to challenge in your life?
Totally, yeah. And the street epistemology helps with that. I let people pick any topic. So
Yeah.
if it could be something I know a lot about or know nothing about, and I try to get a lot of reasons of people and explore how we can know about whatever. So that's a good way. And also, I have a YouTube channel, and I'm trying to start this new series called Reason Review, where the main question is, how can we what's the best way to make the world a better place? And I have a bunch of different ideological tribes answers to that. There's like the religion, Enlightenment humanism, traditional values, gender critical feminism, social justice. And I'm trying to fill out all of these, reasons with evidence and sources and books. So I'm like always watching a YouTube video or listening to an audiobook or reading articles. It's a full-time thing.
Is there something recently that you had another one of those like, oh my God, I was wrong moments? Like I get them all the time. I have a lot of ignorance. I get them all the time where someone gives me like a perspective and I'm like, oh my gosh, what I thought was right was not. What happened to me recently, one was predatory loans in like bad neighborhoods. And I always just was like, yeah, predatory loans are clearly bad. And then I read something that Thomas Sowell wrote, and he's, more on the conservative side, but basically like these are opportunities for people who aren't given opportunities at a bank. And it has saved, he gave a bunch of examples of people who were able to keep their rent up because they got that and paid it off right in time. And as long as you pay it off in time, like it's an opportunity if you are responsible to get access to money if you need it. And I was like, ah, damn it. Yeah, that's true. I guess it's not just clear. Like I can't find anything that's just clearly evil, or very few things that are just clearly wrong in, and things that are like just clearly wrong, clearly right. That was one for me. Do you have something recently that you experienced that was something similar?
I guess something in the past year or two is there's this show called The Glenn Show on Blogging Heads TV with John McWhorter and Glenn Lowry. And they talk about, they're black guys and they academics, and they talk about racism and racial politics. And I guess a main issue that I changed my mind about is just the systemic nature of police brutality or just racial discrimination. It's not that. It's like a more complex story, I'll just say at this point.
Yeah.
It's not like a bunch of racist cops, that type of thing. There's more complex to that.
Yeah, both of them are brilliant. Glenn Lowry and John McWhorter. I had the opportunity to talk briefly with John McWhorter over the summer. If you're curious on that issue, the one that Reid, you're mentioning about police brutality and things like that, I think John McWhorter has commented on it at length in his YouTube videos and stuff like that. He's a brilliant linguist professor and stuff like that. And it's just like, makes it more complicated. And again, I'm not scared to have that stuff happen. I get like a little frustrated sometimes because it's nice to have a little bit of solid foundation of reality about what you believe to be true or not. And a lot of it gets shaky. And I do seek out the shaky ground, but it makes it shaky nonetheless.
Yeah. It's hard to be, out there on the ledge trying to figure out if we should be more confident, less confident about whatever. But I always try to be open to change my mind. It's never always 100%, never certainty, never solid.
It is good. It is good to stay curious. I don't know. I just going through that is a jolting process, so to speak. It's still, I still find it very rewarding. And I think that it also it's easier than having to pretend like you know everything, especially for teachers out there, for the teachers listening. I made the mistake when I was a young teacher of when kids would ask me a question that I wasn't sure about, I'd make up an answer or just like BS my way through it. And now it's so freeing just to be like, I don't know, let's figure this out. And I just hijack the lesson to become, let's answer this. And we can get out our phones, we can do internet searches, test the different sources that we find the information from, and it becomes a really teachable moment. And for your students, they love it because they are young and they want to see you be on a little bit unshaky ground and just like, oh, you don't have it all together? Oh, then it's okay that I don't have it all together at 16.
Yeah. Yeah, it's like I grew up in the 90s, went to elementary school there. Like we didn't have a way to get an answer immediately. So that didn't happen until high school. And then it was kind of janky until college when it was super reliable. So this is very new for humans to be able to do this type of thing. And it's just something we're going to have to work through because it's so valuable, but so it's like the double-edged sword of having flat earth, explanations for the world and scientific explanations. We just need to be able to discern what's true more reliably.
Yeah. Yeah. And but what a good pursuit to be in, I suppose, especially if you're in education, if you're a teacher, just structuring a class around being curious in everything, like I said before, like taking that away from kids is just, it's so bad. I was thinking that we just, for the last like 15 minutes or so, that we just sample kind of like what you do so people can go to your YouTube channel and check it out. Cause I'm sure you've done a lot of different topics that people are curious about. Is it typically, you said how does this work? So if we can sample, like, how does this work? If you have your little, like your booth at Runyon Canyon or something, I just got back from a jog. How does it generally start?
I've got a little cart where I load up all my stuff and I put a little sign on it with Post-it notes with questions on the Post-it notes. Just discussion questions that can be answered yes or no. Examples are like, should U.S. universities have affirmative action policies? Does anything supernatural exist? Is it ethical to limit immigration to retain a culture? The more like, I also have open questions like, is there anything you believe but tend not to say because other people might think you're a bad person? Which we can then find a topic that can be answered yes or no. So I'm more interested in taboos and dogmas, these types of things. People that usually people don't talk about too much, but still are kind of core to who they are, their identity. So those are the more interesting ones to talk about.
Yeah. So the affirmative action one, I just read a book called Mismatch about that. Just about like how I guess the idea of it is that it affects poor Black communities negatively, which is kind of, it's a, perverse reaction to what you're trying to do as far as unintended consequences go. Do things tend to fall more on one end of the political spectrum?
I am in Los Angeles and it's 99% liberals.
Yeah, that makes sense.
At least, well, I don't know. There's a few every now and then conservatives or pro-life. I've also, is abortion murder? So some people have been pro-life about that. But it varies.
Okay. Yeah, that kind of makes sense. So, yeah, we think we can pick any. The problem is, I'm just gonna say I don't know. But we can do like, do I believe in anything supernatural? Is that works?
That's a classic, sure.
Okay. So I'll like sit down. Essentially, I got to think about what I think about supernatural. I used to think about, like, if I saw a ghost, it would be so scary not because ghosts exist, but because I'm crazy now and going crazy is terrifying to me.
You're crazy now?
Yeah, if you see a ghost, like, oh no, now I'm seeing things. That's
okay.
Yeah.
But that's an example of the supernatural. Any other examples? What does supernatural mean? Yeah.
Yeah. So the question is, so we'll do supernatural. So what does supernatural mean?
Yeah. What are examples of supernatural things? What does it mean?
So I guess it would be anything that defies the natural law. So physics, mathematics, stuff like that.
Okay. An example is ghosts. Anything else?
Yeah, I guess anything that would define that. So any levitation or anything that breaks natural laws, things that have never occurred before, that are recorded, have occurred. And if something like that would happen, that would be supernatural.
Yeah, the people usually give like ghosts, gods, karma, reincarnations, law of attraction, stuff like that.
Would reincarnation be supernatural?
Like souls, which requires reincarnation seems to require a soul.
Yeah. Okay. So I guess maybe I'm spoiling this. I'm not very good at this. Like, I guess it wouldn't, to me, because my definition would be, it would be aligned with physics. I don't know if I would say that's, I guess it doesn't align with physics, but there's no proof in either direction of it. So it doesn't feel like it would break a law, because I don't know what the law of physics would be that would say that you don't have a soul, just because it's never been proven, I suppose.
Sure, yeah. We don't want to multiply beyond the necessities, so like Occam's razor.
Yeah, I guess I just would go to, when it comes to supernatural, this goes in the religious as well, is I would just tend to lean on, there's a lot we haven't figured out yet. And we're either getting closer with our technology and things like that to reveal more and more and more, or we're getting closer to just revealing how little we actually know. And it becomes just exponentially more. I think it was like a Terence McKenna quote or something like that, where as you learn more, it just shines more light on the bonfires of ignorance and things like that.
Yeah, our circle of ignorance gets bigger the more at the edge there, with more stuff we don't even know.
Yeah.
Is this a good reason to believe anything supernatural?
So I suppose,
is this even a reason for you?
Yeah. Yeah, I think that there is still a reason for me to believe in some supernatural, especially if we're talking about getting into God and religious ideas. In the secular arguments of I see it as like the Brett Weinstein metaphorical truth, say, like, there are benefits to believing this that are measurable in the natural law, measurable in the real world, to believing it, even if it's factually not true. Like the idea that it's like a myth where even if it's not factual, it is true. That kind of idea.
Yeah. Does something having utility, does it matter to you if what you believe is factual in terms of a God, or is it just a utility thing for you? Does it matter for you?
I suppose it matters. I think whether or not it matters because it feels it's a way to get me to get more buy-in, I suppose it might be. But the results matter. That takes presidency. I don't think I would, if I didn't see a real world benefit to it, I don't think I would believe it.
Okay. How confident are you in a God? 0 to 100. If 100 could not be mistaken, not asking any more questions.
As I stand now in my life now, it would be, I'm 100% confident, because I believe it's a faith-based argument, which isn't something that can be proven. I know I'd go into this with my eyes open. Like, this is not something that's based on data that could be proven. So I would say I would have to be 100%, but that's right now in this moment. That could change given new data brought forth.
Okay, it's not based on data or anything observable. It's a faith-based thing. What do you mean by faith?
It is something that I choose to believe in without the evidence that's quantifiable, that couldn't also be attributed to something else in a real way.
Okay, something you choose to believe.
Yeah.
All right. If a Hindu got on our Zoom chat right now and said, I choose to believe in Vishnu. It's a faith-based thing. Would that be a good reason to believe in Vishnu? To be factually true?
So I wouldn't say like my faith is like a fact based. It's more of a faith based. If someone comes in and says that they believe in a God, Vishnu, or otherwise based on a fact based, I think that would be a different. It's almost like I see it as like playing a different game.
Okay, it matters to you if it's factually true, yet you're using something that does not involve facts to come to it.
Yes. It does, because I'm arguing from the side of this is why I believe it, even though it's not backed by facts. So if someone says they believe this and it is backed by facts, I would ask, what are the facts?
Mm-hmm. So if faith is a non-fact based thing, it's a kind of a decision choosing to believe. Could a Hindu choose to believe, not based on facts, in Vishnu as a good way to, is that a good way to come to believe in Vishnu?
I don't know if it's like good or bad. I don't think it would work for me to base it on facts, which is why I love reading apologetics and listening to those debates. But I think that the only way to probably have a faith for me, for like the way my brain works, would be to have one that's based on, this is not something I'm going to be able to quantify.
Okay. So if I'm seeing you using this way of coming to this belief and a Hindu is coming to their belief in the exact same way, using the same methods, is there any way to tell which one is more accurate in their beliefs or less accurate?
To tell which one would be more accurate in their beliefs?
Yeah, if someone is seeing both of you using those ways of coming to believe in a God or Vishnu, could someone tell which one was possibly mistaken?
Oh, to that third person. Again, I don't know if they would. I think that would be whichever one probably resonates with them more. I wouldn't say, I don't tend to subscribe to like, I believe in, let's say, in Christianity, but I'm an atheist in all those other ones. Like, I might be, but that I don't subscribe that this is the right one. I just believe it's the right one for me. So a third party might say something like, I don't know what they would resonate. They might disagree with the methods of both of them.
The right one for you.
Yeah.
Because of certain things it does for you in terms of utility.
Yes. Yeah. And I think it's utility, and it's the story helps me to make sense of the world and lead me to things that are even like curiosity. Like it helps me to give me a foundation. Like when I said about, the having shaky ground is a little scary of like, what is reality? So to have some sort of, like anchor, because we don't really have any anchors, right? Like, I mean, even the laws of physics could go away. We thought the earth was flat until, we sailed around it. So I think just like having an anchor, even if it's like just having faith in that anchor, and you're not sure if it's real or not, serves me. So yeah, it's a utility thing. Yeah.
So this is something you care about, having an anchor, which relates to making sense of the world. Without an anchor, it's hard to really make sense, like really know. Is that what I'm hearing you say?
I think you still could. I like having it. For me, it probably like keeps my brain a little bit like stable, because otherwise I just would question. I think that's part of it. I think a big part of the utility too, now I'm thinking about it, would be for my kids, having kids and giving them a sense of these stories that, someone, a higher power loves them and things like that. And then I will encourage my kids to go out and, read Harris and read Peter's book and things like that, and then help them to make up their own mind. But I think giving them that base for me is good. But I had JD Becker on the show, who writes atheist children's books, and I think his books are awesome too. and I'll read those to my kids too. Cause but that's another big part of the utility. I don't know if that answered your question.
Okay. So what I'm hearing you say is it also helps, in addition to make sense of the world, it helps with your kids have a way of making, is it related to purpose or meaning or anything like that?
Yeah. Especially when you're young and you're making sense of it and you're trying to figure out, the very basics. Again, like talking about like the bonfires of ignorance and stuff like that, or the light is, just really basic questions. What happens when you die and things like that. The I don't know is pretty jolting, I think, to a 3-year-old or a 4-year-old or something like that. So, well, I do say I don't know, but here is, what I, believe, or here's one kind of narrative I think is good. And then exposing them to other things a little bit. Yeah.
Okay. What's the second best way to be able to have these utilities without a God?
The second best way to have, I think I don't know if I think it's just either this way or the other way of what we're doing, which is curiosity. So I think it's either have a God, or if you're talking about like for an anchor, I think it would be in relationships. It would be in having, close people that you can rely on for stability in your life and things like that.
Okay. And making sense of the world.
Yeah. When you're making sense of the world, when you're trying to figure out what is, the unanswerable questions about why we are here and, what happens when you die, what happened before you were born, things of that nature. I think that, I don't know what it would be. It's either, to me, it would either be the faith argument or just based on the data that we have and, go do the deep dive on that side. But maybe, is life, do you view it as a mystery or a puzzle? I think when you have a faith base, it's a little bit more on the mystery side. And then when you're not, it would be more on the puzzle side. So like, you don't know, but it's okay because we'll figure it out type of idea.
Okay. Do you have any disconfirmation criteria that would shift you from possibly not 100, but like 99.999?
Yeah. Okay. So then we have 2 minutes. I do want to break this down. This is awesome. Thank you, Reid, for doing this. Sure. So my disconfirmation process is what I've been doing, what I did, months ago, and I'm still doing it. I listened to Christopher Hitchens today. So hearing, the best minds, the most brilliant minds, going down, exposing what their beliefs are. It's tough because I do have my ideas, but it's cool to hear them make really good points. And I go, wow, that's a really good point. And then I have to think my way through it, or, hear the debate. I think that it's important to have really the best arguments on both sides. I don't want to see, Hitchens argue with, a Southern Baptist minister particularly, but to see him argue with, David Wolpe, or to see him, hear Jordan Peterson and Sam Harris, I think, especially because Jordan Peterson's more of like a secular Christian, I guess he calls himself. I think that is what's really interesting for me to hear the way they do it. Because if it's one-sided, same thing with Jordan Peterson versus just an average person on the street atheist I don't think it'd be very good. I like hearing the best. So that's the disconfirmation that I'm seeking. Could that get me to 99.99? I think it could. I think what it could happen is I lose it a little bit and then seek, more and more and more. And what's happened so far is as I, get a little question like, wow, that's a really good point. What is that? As I meditate on it or read more stuff on it and things like that, then it tends to kind of solve itself. Like the way the faith is structured seems to bring me back around. But then again, I have my ideology, I suppose.
Okay.
Yeah.
What I'm hearing you say is a part of it, disconfirmation criteria be just hearing more conversations, more rebuttals, conversations.
Yeah.
What specifically could you learn? Anything that you could see or learn to be that disconfirmation?
Nothing that I could. Yeah, that's a great question. Like essentially what could they say or what argument could be proposed, that could get me to change my mind? The hypothetical, not saying that there is, but if there was, what would that be? Mm-hmm. thinking about it. I haven't found anything yet. But that's something that I think about often. I think about it often because I think what it's done so far is bring me a little bit closer to the faith side, but it's something that could definitely, swing back and forth, to some degree. But yeah, I actively think about that, but I haven't been able to find that yet, but yeah.
Still searching for something specific? Not sure.
Yeah, I don't have anything specific, but I do search it. So I do think of something, and then I like look it up and hear arguments, or I read about what Sam wrote about it, or something like that. And I I'm just in that pursuit. This pursuit's probably going to last me a while, but I enjoy it. Yeah.
Cool. Well, we can wrap it up there. That was
good. Yeah. Thank you. Do you, yeah, that was awesome. Do you, go until, do you stop them, or do they always stop them?
I feel it out. I want to get to some point where they're thinking, where they're reflecting, ideally. I let them also set a timer. So if the time goes off, I ask if they want to keep going, and then I try to feel it out. I want at least one moment of reflection.
Yeah.
And I don't want to I don't want to push and make them super uncomfortable. It's
right.
Like you want to be in this zone of comfortably uncomfortable,
yeah,
respectful, but challenging.
Oh, for sure. And I did it right there. I mean, that's what it seemed like we could pick anything, whether we picked immigration or affirmative action or something like that. And I think it eventually is going to just get more and more broad until it becomes like, like a God question. Do you ever hear the Louis C.K. bit about why?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Like, it gets like, we can't go. Why? Because we're outside. Why? And then it gets like, because I didn't pay attention in school. And then it gets to like, because some things are and some things are not. Why? Because you can't have nothing isn't. You can't have giant ants with top hats. It's so ridiculous. It's so good. It seems like that's kind of the way that it goes. But wrapping this up, Reid, this was awesome. Thanks for doing that too. I was like getting to, even for me, who's like constantly doing this, the process is very different to go through with someone else. And I've done it before with people, but you are particularly good at it, I think, because like your cadence, you're slow, like you like that, like you have like the right kind of setup for it.
Cool. Thanks. Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. So where can people find you? Where can people kind of follow what you're doing, reach out to you, anything like that? And,
sure. Yeah. Just Google Cordial Curiosity, YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, Twitch. I'm on all these things. You should be able to find me pretty easily. I'm trying to go out twice a week, once to UCLA, 12 to 4 p.m. Pacific, and once on Saturdays at Runyon Canyon, 12 p.m. to 4 p.m. And if you're in Los Angeles, feel free to stop by and we can have a chat.
Actually, I'm writing that down. So it's UCLA 12 to 4 on what days?
Wednesdays.
Okay. UCLA Wednesdays, 12 to 4 Pacific, and Runyon is what time? Or what day?
Same time. Saturdays.
That's awesome. Reid, I really appreciate you doing this. That was cool. And it's even cool to go through it. It's like, oh man, yeah, there's a lot of stuff I haven't really thought about. Very cool. Thank you for doing this. Thank you for listening. And yeah, I guess we'll see you next time.
Yeah, thanks. Keep up with the good podcast. Great.
Thank you, sir. Hey, so I hope you enjoyed that podcast. What Reid does and epistemology and talking about curiosity is so aligned with everything that I'm about and promote in education and why I started this podcast. So after I finished recording, I went back and I listened to it and I kept thinking about it for days and doing more of a deep dive into all of the things that we talked about regarding faith and things like that. And coming from someone like me who, is actively always pursuing why I think what I think and seeking disconfirmation and things like that, to go through that process with someone who's as good as Reid is and the way that he kind of structures things and stuff like that, having a good kind of dance partner really helped me to reflect. And it was such an awesome process. And I shared it with my classes the next couple of days, and told people that I know who live near Runyon Canyon and UCLA to go and sit down with Reid and go through this process. Because while I think for some individuals, they walk away with a feeling like, oh no, why do I think this stuff and I must be wrong? I didn't feel like I was necessarily wrong in the answers that I gave, but it did help me to kind of force myself to flush out why I think what I think a little bit more. And a couple of things that I just wanted to share that were kind of going through my head, because we were talking about faith, and I don't talk about religion, my personal religion, a whole lot on my social media or on the podcast. But I think this was appropriate for me to just come in and share a little bit about why I think what I think. And again, it's not, I said this while I was talking to Reid, like, this is not something that I believe is necessarily for everyone, or I believe that I am the one who's in the right and everyone who thinks something differently is wrong. So someone who's Jewish or Hindu or Muslim or atheist is wrong. This is just what I believe, and we're all different. So why I have the beliefs that I do as far as faith and as far as believing in Christianity, just a little bit of background. I was not a Christian. I was raised in a Christian household to some degree. Like, we went to church on Sundays, but it wasn't like we didn't pray before meals or anything like that. I was, for all intents and purposes, an atheist. And it was actually through the pursuit of knowledge that brought me closer to the faith side, which is really unusual. It was that and having a family, but it's really unusual. Typically, people are raised in a very religious household, and then they go out and they get educated, and that pulls them away from faith. And I actually had the opposite effect, which is really interesting. So a couple of things that I didn't talk about that I feel like I should address about why I have the faith that I do is just some specifics. Is one that I didn't mention about why I talked about having an anchor. And what I didn't mention about having an anchor is the aspect of suffering in life. And this is something that Jordan Peterson has talked about a lot. But so much of life involves some level of suffering. So I've spent a lot of time in the hospital myself, and that was really tough times, losing people close to you and things like that. When suffering occurs, when you lose someone very close to you or something along those lines, having the feeling, again, even if it is just a metaphorical truth or a myth, that someone is feeling that with you, a higher power, so to speak, that gives you some comfort. Also, the idea of Christianity, the way that I see it, is it's a story where God sends his son down to earth, and his son is a good man, and that good man is killed in a very violent, brutal way, and God has to see that happen. And I think, what is the worst thing that can happen to a human being? And I think even worse than death would be losing a child. I think that's far worse than dying yourself. And when something terrible happens in your life, even up to the point of that, the worst thing possible, people turn to God. God, how could you let this happen? How could you, you don't know what this is like, so to speak. And in Christianity, the story goes that God did that so he, she, it could feel that with you, like put themselves into a human form and feel the physical pain, but then the emotional pain of losing a child, so that whether it's physical, whether it's emotional, there is, you're not alone. And I think the feeling of not being alone when logic would tell you that you are might be something beneficial. So when I talked about an anchor, I don't think I articulated that well enough. Also, there is a level, a lot of people have faith because of personal experiences, like, I felt God's presence or something like that. Now, that's a tough argument because it's completely subjective. Myself, I have had, elements of that, but, most of the time when I had those experiences, I wasn't looking for God or really probably noticed it at the time. But I've had two very, very rare brain issues. One is intracranial hypertension, which is really, really rare. It's like 1 in 100,000 cases, and it's mostly obese women, and I am not an obese woman. 9% of those are men, and very rare, a handful of cases, ever would be men who were in their early 20s when I had it, where basically my brain makes too much spinal fluid. And then about 2 years ago, I had venous sinus thrombosis, which is another brain issue where I had a clot form in my brain, and it caused a hemorrhagic stroke. And I had a stroke, and I came out of that okay. I came out of the first one okay. And venous sinus thrombosis is about 5 in a million people get that. So, when you want to quantify, like, what are the chances that I get venous sinus thrombosis and intracranial hypertension, I looked at like medical journals and stuff like that and what the odds are. And the odds I put into a calculator, I don't even know what this means. It's 4.5 e to the negative 12th. I'm the only person on the planet that's ever had both of those. And it could be because of venous sinus stenosis that was undiagnosed the first time or something like that. But when you have these personal experiences, when I was in the hospital and people were saying they were praying for me, even when I was essentially an atheist, I came out of it okay. And I came out of it with actually a greater sense of meaning and purpose and more aligned in my life. I actually, the day I went into the hospital with the stroke, I took my 1-year-old to the doctor to get a shot in his arm. And when he got the shot, he looked at me and started crying because he was only 1 year old. And that was probably the most pain he ever felt in his life. And I was trying to explain to him, like, nah, buddy, this is a vaccine. It's a vaccine. It'll make you feel good. I know it doesn't feel good, but it'll feel good, in the future when you don't get sick. So I know it hurts now, but it's for something good. You just don't understand it. And he's 1 year old, so he's looking at me like, what are you talking about? I don't understand. All I know is that this hurts. And then that night, I went into the ICU with a brain hemorrhage. And it seems like fairly aligned. Like, why did I have this second really rare brain issue? And it was painful and it was horrible and everything like that. And perhaps, I don't know, but there is a reason. I have, a lot of wonderful things in my life, and I've been very blessed in my life. My family is amazing. My kids are amazing. My job is great. I'm very lucky, and so I have good things in my world, and perhaps this is happening. This physical pain, the emotional pain is happening for a reason that we just don't understand, the same way that my 1 year old didn't understand why he was getting a shot. So if it happens on that level, perhaps it happens on a level where we couldn't possibly understand God's ways. So when God does stuff to us, we might be angry or say that this is painful, but we don't know because we don't know the end of the story yet. Something along those lines. So anyway, that's a little bit of where I was at. And then since we recorded, which was about a week ago, I just kept on doing it. I kept on, diving into why I believe what I believe when it comes to the supernatural, which was a topic that I picked. And it got me into the transcendental arguments for God, which is really fascinating. Like the tools that are used by a lot of atheists are actually tools that have some level of faith, or have some level of there's some ideas that aren't necessarily provable. Also, concepts like mathematics is not something that is necessarily understood how that came to be. So I'm just now getting into it, but the idea of transcendental arguments for God it's fascinating. The whole thing's fascinating. And again, this is not me trying to promote any of you getting into a religion. It's not for me to promote any of you getting out of a religion, but I am promoting you to take the walk. It's really, really awesome. And I said this in a post on my Instagram. I know some just amazingly kind and generous atheists, amazingly kind and generous Jews and Christians and Hindus and Buddhists and everything. Like, I'm trying to figure this stuff out, figure it out for me, figure it out for the world. And it's a really fun adventure. So that's kind of all I wanted to say at the end here. I just wanted to kind of clear that up a little bit because we got into it, and it's something that I haven't talked about before. So I just wanted to share a little bit, some of those anecdotes and some of my thoughts. But I encourage all of you, if you get the opportunity, to go through the process of the street epistemology stuff. And because I've done it with myself, it's way more effective with someone who knows what they're doing, and to have that dance partner, so to speak. So thank you for listening to this little bonus part at the end of the episode. Thank you to Reid, who's awesome and really good at what he does, and I really appreciate what he's doing, just getting out there and just staying on that grind, getting people to think more. And I think we're aligned in that. So I guess that's it, and I will see you next time.